totally scared me. So they're still doing fireworks here in some places here in Orange County. But I just wanted to jump on. So to be honest, I'm not really like a big relationship person. I'm not really someone who like enjoys being somebody's everything. So, but I wanted to talk about it because I always felt like, even though there are things that you're supposed to keep to yourself, like your own personal values about looking for love, I always felt like there was something that the church had that most people didn't really have, and or at least had, but then it just seemed sad to see it in person. And even sometimes, even in my own stuff, I'll talk about it a little later as I go on and here and my little confessional about looking for love. And so I'll start off. Oh my god, I just squished my balls. So I grew up in a big family, and my idea of love has always been from what I had seen it, and in how I viewed it. And so for me here, when I think of love, the first immediate idea of what a loving relationship looks like for me is my parents. And so 4th of July just happened, and there was that. We just had it 2 days ago, and my parents, they had 7 kids together, but growing up, we always heard random stories about how my parents met. But the thing that intrigued me the most about how I looked at their relationship, and then how I saw their relationship in love, or for me here, and the way they loved each other, is the way I view love, and even how I open myself up to taking risk, or just dating, or in general. So I'll tell you a little about my parents. So my parents, my dad is an Army brat. Meaning he grew up in American Samoa. So the Americans, they have a portion of American Samoa where all of their Navy boats basically are there for war. So basically, if you have an establishment as a country, as one of the greatest countries in the world, you establish your flag, like you do it on the moon. And so the Americans have ownership, basically, of American Samoa. And so my father, he was an Army brat because the Americans, during that time that he was born, and even after that time, the only way to get out of Samoa, that ticket from hi, hello, on my way. That's the only thing I knew on Samoan. So hold on, okay. So the only thing I know, so for my parents, my dad grew up in American Samoa, but there's the Samoan traditional way of conducting everyday living in life, which is called the Samoa way, which is your parents, you respect your elders, you go to school, church, and work, and that's pretty much it. I believe that in the other part of the independent island that's still overseen by, I'm not sure who exactly is there, sovereign nation, but that they still operate a Monday through Saturday schedule, and then on Sunday everybody reserves Sunday for a day of church. So my father, I had talked to my aunt years ago when I had first got depressed and started using drugs. My aunt had told me a story that how their father was never around. And and so my grandmother, my dad's mom, remarried a man named Levale, and that's where our last name comes in, Levale. And he was serving in the Army, in the American Army, in the Navy in Guam. And so he, in order for for them to have a good life and the American benefits, they ended up moving to Guam. But my mother stayed for probably a good 30 years on the island in Manua. Manua is a whole other story, but she ended up remaining there, living in my mother ended up staying there until she came here in high school. And she didn't speak English in the 70s, but so my mother has these traditional Christian values of doing something Monday through Saturday, and then my dad has the Army strict view of how to be a good American, and then has very little bit of his Samoan culture. And so they both moved around, but then they were both very unlikely individuals at the same time, because for my mother, it was very important for people of Samoa to marry their own type of people and to stay. So they did marry the same time. They were the same type of couple, but my dad didn't have the village structure that my mom was used to. And so when she came to America and she's seen a Polynesian man who didn't speak any Samoan, who spoke very little Samoan, and had all of the American tendencies of that generation, which were party, rock and roll, the Beatles, drinking, bar fights, etc. And my mother was a little more reserved, who didn't have but she still kind of she basically assimilated when she came here. So growing up, I had two types of worlds that were of the same race but of different upbringings, who loved each other. And so I always knew that, because my parents were very cognizant about reminding me about how they met. And so 2 days ago we just had, was it 2 days ago? Yeah, we just had 4th of July. And my parents, they ended up eloping, and so my mom and dad both had the same birthday, October 28th, but they're 10 years apart. So she married him when she was 19, but he was 29, and so there's like time frame differences and stuff. But basically, I always got to hear the stories about how my dad was not really the perfect man growing as a husband to her. He was kind of a wild man, and so she had to deal with the things as a lot of the women at the time do. But oh, sweet. So what I loved about my parents is that they had mastered the good cop bad cop routine, but in terms of love, they always did everything for each other. And so there's how do you say, I think the men of that generation very differently to the men of this generation, where there's a sense of pride in I don't want to say owning your wife or having a wife, but is in a sense where when the men, at least it seems in such a way, as they progressed into the relationship, is that they grew to love to take care of their woman. And so this is why I'm kind of like, if you ever see me, I'm like always on the sidelines, not on the sideline but a sideline of rooting for straight people, because I think straight people have very similar love tendencies in terms of their own values, how they pace themselves and going and loving one another, and then making that decision to just be with one person for the rest of their life. And so it's almost the same for gays, but the thing with gays, and for me, and this is where I'm going, is that I always had this picture perfect fairy tale in terms of how my parents loved each other. And so there's some things that in terms of the example that I saw that made me say, okay, this is good, because I always knew the difference between good and bad. And so because it was so good for me, I never really saw anything wrong in it. And so like growing up, my parents, they never argued in front of me, but I ended up learning years later that if they did argue, they argued away from the children. And so little things like that they made for us, so that way our eyes could be hidden from the rest of the world, so that way we can live somewhat of an innocent childhood. But when you integrate and you have these cultures, we clash together, we kind of get insight on people run their homes a lot differently, and there's nothing wrong with that. And so that's why for me, when I want to talk about love, or when I talk about my preferences in love, it's based on the way I grew up. And so the way I grew up is I always look at it the way my parents did it. So there's somewhat of a progress in it. And so it always became difficult, and then especially difficult when I started having my Christian faith added unto it. It was difficult because I had this kind of stewardship and friendship that came with wanting to be in a loving romantic relationship, but because of our community, it's so rare that anything ever lasts in such a long time. And so we have these apps, and they're great because I totally use them, like to have sex or whatever, like for Grindr, or to go to the club and meet someone, and then you take them home, and you have to, or even just dates, and whether you're dating someone for a certain time period, we know that they're just flings and they're one night stands and stuff. So we all use those things because we have needs. And we meet people, but in the end, we internalize and keep the values that we grow up with. And so I always looked at my parents, and I still kind of am like holding out on that, because the whole idea of my mom being a very traditional Christian woman, and then my dad kind of being like a very wild, do whatever the fuck I want to do from the 70s type of man, as long as I get my, take care of my kids and am good to my community, then I'm going to do fine. And so he was all those things. And so if I can maintain those things, and if someone can understand that, then that's kind of like where I'm looking for. But I'm not really trying to talk about looking for love and the pursuit of looking for love. I'm just talking about looking for love. And I think a lot of Christian people too, and this is where I'll just kind of fast forward and just jump into how the Christian culture is such a good thing. Sometimes it's kind of evolved because we're going to do what we want to do, but it's evolved in the sense that we have these don't have sex before you get married, totally broke that, don't move in with somebody and live in the same household, and they call it a courtship, where you speak with father or authority figure, and you ask to court their son or daughter, so that way you could pursue a long-term relationship. And the intention and the goal ultimately is so that you would get married. And so the intention and the value of a Christian in a loving Christian relationship is a good thing. But then, we're in the times we're in, we're going to do what we want to do. We're going to experiment, and we're going to get our heart broken, and we're going to go about doing the things we want to do. And so I think for me, that is probably the biggest thing, is because I'm at 36, and side note is like when you're running and gunning, and I'll back up, and then I'll get to running and gunning. And so when I came out of the closet, I had my Christian faith, and then I had my familial values. So I had my mom and dad's values, and then I had my Christian values, and then I came out of the closet, and then I was adopting these LGBTQ values, these values that said, if you can't love yourself, how are you going to love somebody else? And so these LGBTQ values I wanted to accept myself, and I wanted to learn to love myself. And a lot of gay people, and I had learned this, thank God I learned this, because it opened me up to just being a little more comfortable around the idea that I'm no different from straight people. When I was in rehab, I was talking to my therapist, and she was like, and going about how I'm running and gunning. When we're running and gunning, we're using drugs, and we're being promiscuous, and we're out there, and we're making ourselves available, and we're not guarding something that is a treasure or supposed to be too, or is a treasure or something that's supposed to be too available to somebody. We end up giving it all away. But when we're LGBTQ, we fail to realize that straight people kind of go through the same thing. So I was so thankful that I was able to build a relationship with people in Arizona to at least just hear and see and understand that in any relationship that sometimes we give too much of ourselves away without loving and protecting so much of ourselves. And so this is where I wanted to kind of jump on and talk about I know there's like programs where you go into like a recovery program, or you go into a ministry school, or you go into, I think they call it missions work, and if you're a Mormon, and you end up devoting a year or two of yourself to a value or a higher power or something that gives you the opportunity to protect and cultivate something that is yours without having to give it away to somebody, and something that we're so used to doing. And so when you start to cultivate something inside yourself, or allow God the space and time and day to come in your heart and cultivate those things inside yourself, so that you could be able to give that to somebody else, you end up seeing kind of like you end up kind of seeing the bigger picture in terms of when people are looking for love. And so this is the reason why I titled it Looking for Love. Looking for Love is because it goes back to, for me personally, it goes back to a song that I had growing up listening to. It's like, it says the group is called Out of Eden, and it's a perfect name for Adam and Eve because they got kicked out of Eden. And so it's a girl group, a Christian group, and they talk about looking for love, looking for love, looking for love in all the wrong places. Excuse me. Justifying someone to ease the hurt and pain. And so I wanted to make it a bus bench confessional, or bus bench bums confessional. I'm really going too far with these three words that have the same beat. It's a tongue twister. But when we're out here, and we're, at least for me, I knew that at first not only the physiological or the carnal nature or the human sexual frustrations that we go through when we're out here in ourselves, we already know we're looking for love in the wrong place. At least you're gonna learn. at least if you think you're looking for love and you don't have your heart in check, a miracle, we'll pray a miracle happens, that your heart doesn't get broken for giving your heart away to somebody else, unknowingly knowing that, two halves don't make a whole, or two halves don't make a pair. And so, I think, that's kind of the biggest thing that I just wanted to chat about. And I didn't want to go on because I struggle with, I think I even struggled with this too when I was working at the Kids Club too, is I always thought when I got into the field of any field, and the church, I've heard sermons where the church saw it differently because I guess the physical loss was so much bigger. But I always personally thought, and I used this whole analogy, and I had no idea that Gandhi used the same concept, is that we're all drops in the ocean. He talks about this holistic identity, how in society we are our identity, or we're all individual drops, so no one can be separate from one another, and no one can be the entire ocean. And so I think for me, I totally lost my train of thought. But anywho, I think for me, I wanted to be able to be cognizant, but not be afraid of being able to share the things that I had loved and cherished growing up. And a lot of people would disagree, but in fear that it would offend somebody who didn't have it. And so thankfully, like, in the neighborhood that we grew up in, everybody pretty much had a loving family, and everybody had difficult times. Most of the time in the neighborhood that I grew up, the parents stayed together, and the parents are still together there if they didn't pass on or whatever. And so, but in the running and gunning community, where we're all bums on a bench somewhere, it's important, at least for me, to put it in the universe, and how important it was for me to be able to know the difference, not only between lust and love, but then also to know the difference that, in essence, our search in the way we use drugs, and the way we go about in aging, and in the way we go about pursuing our career goals, it's a search for love, and we're looking for love. And so sometimes, you ended up crashing into that brick wall, and you're like, oh my God, I'm looking for love in all the wrong places. And so if you could, I don't know, if it's possible, because there's also, for some people, they think that like being a being a slut has some kind of meaning, going around and giving yourself to everybody, eventually just wasn't meant to be. But if you can protect your heart, because I think a lot of the things, even to just being a part of the LGBT community, is that we think we love each other, but sometimes the message we're sending to somebody else. I saw this on a thing in church too. I was really kind of happy too, because coming from the LGBT community prior to the coming out, where the disclosure, where men and even women weren't allowed to come out, and then seeing the difference between not being in the closet, and then coming out of the closet, and then seeing the behavior of in the closet, and then seeing the behavior when they're out of the closet, and then seeing people nowadays, the LGBT community, seeing kind of like no common denominator and some of that. I love that the church sometimes is like, hey, what are you looking for? What do you, not that it is their job to kind of throw you the Lord or throw God in your face, so to speak, or lack of better words. But in essence, what everybody's, as we live together, are hopefully, if you can find love, that you do it in the less harmful, what is the word, to make the least amount of mistakes. And so for me in the LGBT community, having those values, and then being a part of different communities, and then being able to being a part of different communities, and then being able to hold on to those, and then kind of hopefully someone carries along. Like, in the back of my mind, like, I'm open to a wild man like my dad, but I don't know how my mother I don't know how my mom did it. But then again, another thing is just one thing in all of my confessionals is and how we're looking for love. If it can plant a seed, and I really don't want to seem like the person who's like, hey, this is what you're supposed to do. Hi, Tasia. Hello. I don't really want to seem like the person who says this is how you do things, but in essence, if you were to categorize us in the homeless community, we're all eventually looking for something, and so however whatever pace we go at that, the search for it, it's the pace that we go about it. It's I hope that we are mindful of that we're looking, that even though when I didn't think that, or when I thought that I loved myself as a gay man, or when I thought that I loved myself as a Christian, that the message that we're sending, at least for me here, is that it says that we're looking for something. And so whatever you're searching for, whatever you're searching for, I used to always tell this to the guys that came in, because having worked in youth development, I have like these, how do you say, like skill sets that are second-hand nature, where I monitor, and this was our job, was to like monitor the things the teachers wanted us to monitor. And so I'm always like monitoring things, whether they're real or not. I'm always looking to see behavior at different levels, and when people kind of let go of that facade, and when people kind of let go of that mask or put down that guard, and kind of you get to see moments of someone's realness, or you get like nuggets or tidbits of someone being 100% authentic. Those are times when I kind of see through a span of time, because I really don't talk to many people. Like, for example, there's people right now, like I'll keep in memory through this moment and the next moment in the past several years, and then the next several years, it's called an economy, it's called the mobility, and the behavior in that mobility, what people are searching for and looking for. And so, okay, I thought you were going to say love, but all right. So anyway, I think in that, and that's the beauty of being an American that some people kind of forget, is that I used to always tell the people in rehab, I hope you find what you're searching for, because in rehab, so many times people, that behavior monitoring, you see people come in and they're still coming down, and they have their first 30 days of detoxing, and then they have their 60 days of establishing a new behavior, and then they have their 90 days when they start to come to an understanding of what they've been doing while working the steps, and then they have their 120-day little graduation, and then they repeat that process for an additional 120 days, and they keep going that process. And so I'm always cognizant about who comes in, and being hopeful that when someone does come in, that I talked about this last week, was that multiple pathways, is that since I'm watching everybody, someone's coming right now, so that I'm always aware of like the success rates of who makes it and who doesn't. But I know that sounds really bad, but typically what I do, I'm trying to say is that when someone comes in and we have like a simple conversation, and they're on in their own journey searching or looking for something, I always say, I hope you find what you're searching for. I hope you are looking for whatever you're looking for, that you don't end up looking for love in the wrong place. And so whatever it looks like, I hope it leads you to the right place. I hope it ends up leading you guys to the right place. And so I think like going forward for me here, I don't know about love just because I have those values, and I don't think people rarely keep their values. I think a lot of times it's a very power moves. In our culture, things are all about power moves and making moves to gain power and control. And so I'm kind of I loved growing up where we were, as children, excited to see my dad to hear his car pull up, to hear the door open and slam, and to hear the keys ringing and him walking up to the front door and us being excited. And so people had, relatives had known that about our family, is that we had adored our father, that we waited for him to get home. So I think for me, that go to work and then come home to see your family type of love is the type of love that I've always adored. And so because it's so rarely sought after, just to go to work and then come home and be with the ones you love, or the people that you care about, or the people that you choose to love, then that's a possibility in the future. But if I don't see that from the get-go, then it's typically just like a physical relationship and some type of carefree fun for the moment. But other than that, I kind of just see myself not looking for any love, because I know it's going to lead me in the wrong place. But then if someone does share the same values and we can grow upon that, then that's a possibility. But if you're ever hearing my confessions, really, I just thought about that you're not really supposed to hear these confessions. They're supposed to be private. So maybe I should call it something different, like bus bench bums, blah blah blahs, or something like that. I don't know, but I didn't think it all the way through, because you're not supposed to really like tell everybody, but broadcasting your stuff. But if you just still believe in love, and if you are looking for it, I hope you find it. And then if you don't, I hope that you're mindful that some of the things that we do, and I think I keep saying this over and over, that you might be looking for love in the wrong place. So I hope that you find what you're searching for, and whatever value it is, whether it was something you grew up or adopted via spiritual awakeness, or from a new friend or lover, that you're able to enjoy that. So anyways, I hope you guys find love, and I will don't give up on it. I'll talk to you guys soon. Love you.